Welcome to week 5 of the Satipatthana Course. This week we're going to have a look at the next part of the sutra, which is called the dhammas. So we've covered the basics of the first 3 foundations of mindfulness. The foundation of the body, the foundation of feelings, the foundation of the mind. And the way the sutta is developed is that it's kind of like a step-by-step. Each foundation gets more subtle, a little bit needs more experience to see. So as you develop the experience of the body, you start to be able to perceive feelings. As you start to develop experience of body and feelings, you start to develop the ability to see the mind and how it craves, how it attaches. And in the dhammas foundation of mindfulness, it's not a totally new or different part of experience as we have been doing each week, but it is more patterns or the nature of our all experience. And there's different sections within this part, different patterns that we can see, different truths, so to speak, that we can see in all of our experience of body, feelings and mind. Because remembering that in all experience there's always all the foundations of mindfulness. So in every moment there's always the body happening, always feelings happening, always the mind happening, very quickly and all together. So separating them and observing them individually is good, it's the basics, we learn how to do it, but now we also start to see how all of that bundle of experience keeps unfolding, keeps unraveling. So I'm going to first read from the sutta after the mind foundation. The first section is on the hindrances, which we already know, but it gives a bit more detail. And how monks does he in regard to dhammas abide contemplating dhammas. Here, in regard to dhammas, he abides contemplating dhammas in terms of the 5 hindrances. And how does he, in regard to dhammas, abide contemplating dhammas in terms of the 5 hindrances? If sensual desire is present in him, he knows there is sensual desire in me. If sensual desire is not present in him, he knows there is no sensual desire in me. And he knows how unarisen sensual desire can arise, how arisen sensual desire can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed sensual desire can be prevented. If aversion is present in him, he knows there is aversion in me. If aversion is not present in him, he knows there is no aversion in me. And he knows how unarisen aversion can arise, how arisen aversion can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed aversion can be prevented. If sloth and torpor is present in him, he knows there is sloth and torpor in me. If sloth and torpor is not present in him, he knows there is no sloth and torpor in me. And he knows how unarisen sloth and torpor can arise, how arisen sloth and torpor can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed sloth and torpor can be prevented. If restlessness and worry is present in him, he knows there is restlessness and worry in me. If restlessness and worry is not present in him, he knows there is no restlessness and worry in me. And he knows how unarisen restlessness and worry can arise, how arisen restlessness and worry can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed restlessness and worry can be prevented. If doubt is present in him, he knows there is doubt in me. If doubt is not present in him, he knows there is no doubt in me. And he knows how unarisen doubt can arise, how arisen doubt can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed doubt can be prevented. Then the refrain, which I will skip. And for today we're going to do 2 sections of the Dhammas foundation. The next section on aggregates. Again, monks, in regard to dhammas, he abides contemplating dhammas in terms of the 5 aggregates of clinging. And how does he in regard to dhammas abide, contemplating dhammas in terms of the 5 aggregates of clinging? Here he knows such is material form, such is its arising, such its passing away. Such is feeling, such its arising, such is its passing away. Such is cognition, such its arising, its passing away. Such are volitions, such their arising, such their passing away. Such is consciousness, such its arising, such its passing away. So firstly, the word dhammas. The word dhammas, when it's written small, it refers to phenomena. So in this foundation of mindfulness, we are not going into a specific type of phenomena. We are observing all phenomena that are arising. Every single experience, moment by moment, there's phenomena. You're already learning to observe some types of phenomena, some body sensations, some body feelings, some mind sensations, mind images, mind verbal thoughts, and states of consciousness, and everything is composed of phenomena. Sometimes dhammas is also translated as mind objects. So it's kind of like the things that arise in our mind meaning our conscious experience. So anything that arises is dhammas, anything that arises is phenomena. And in this section of the sutta, we have different parts. We have the contemplation of the 5 hindrances, we have the contemplation of the 5 aggregates, we have the contemplation of 6 sense spheres, of the 7 awakening factors, and of the 4 noble truths. The others we will go through in the following weeks, but for this week we have these 2. We have the 5 hindrances, which we already know, which we already met, and then we have the 5 aggregates. So what are the 5 hindrances? This is the first part. So the 5 hindrances are sensual desire, aversion, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. So these are things that we keep seeing in our practice. Probably every time we sit down, there's some version of these hindrances or some combination present. And maybe after some time, they start to kind of settle down in your practice. Some days they are more, some days they are less. Some days you're really buying into their story. Some days you're not as much believing in them. So I won't go much more into detail about what are the actual hindrances, since we already covered that. What's more important in this part is how he tells us, how the Buddha tells us to be mindful of these hindrances. So we have to notice when a given hindrance is present and when it is not present. So let's take, for example, the hindrance of sloth and torpor, sleepiness and drowsiness. So sometimes you know there is sleepiness, there is drowsiness, your mind is foggy, and sometimes you know there is not. And that's the basic level. That's the basic level of mindfulness, of being aware of what's going on in your experience. There's sleepiness, there's not sleepiness. When you start to become aware of it, you start to not buy into it as much. You understand that these hindrances are something that are sometimes present and sometimes not present. We tend to treat them as something permanent. And as we start to notice more and more when a hindrance is present and when it is not present, you can start to see. And it's not analyzing, it's an intuitive knowing of what conditions create this hindrance, how a hindrance arises, and also how a hindrance ceases, how it passes away, what conditions help it pass away. So for example, with sloth and torpor, with sleepiness and drowsiness, you understand maybe you're starting to see the pattern that when I become disengaged, when I become bored, sleepiness, drowsiness tends to arise more. Or maybe it's a physical cause. It's a little bit different. The physical cause, when you are just sleeping, haven't slept much, and sleepiness arises. But we're more interested in the meditative cause. So if you are actually well rested and you sit to meditate, what causes sloth and torpor to arise? Usually is some kind of disengagement of experience, not paying close attention, not being curious about what's happening, creates this checking out. Or not enough effort, not enough energy in the practice. And how does it cease? So when we are just mindful of it, when we relax the craving, the clinging in it, it tends to cease, it tends to dissolve, tends to become weaker. Maybe it doesn't dissolve all the way yet, but you have experience in it becoming weaker. It dissolves maybe in the session, maybe in the next session. So then we're starting to see this hindrance with wisdom. We're starting to see that this hindrance is not me, is not mine, and that this hindrance is impermanent, that it changes, that it arises and it passes away. And it's not, we don't have to take it personally that it's there or that it's not there. There are certain conditions in the mind, in the body that create it, and certain conditions that make it pass away. So then it becomes mindfulness with wisdom, mindfulness with clear comprehension. And the last part, we start to become aware of how a hindrance is, how the arising of a future hindrance is prevented. How can we not have this hindrance anymore? So more and more you start to spend more time without the hindrances in your practice. You are very clear, very calm, very focused, very mindful. And the hindrances, they don't get a chance to arise. And you start to see, how do we become liberated from these hindrances? So of course we need some experience, some time without the hindrances, and this takes time to develop with more mindfulness, more samadhi. And then we start to become more liberated from these hindrances. And the moment something starts, the moment the first thought happens of disengagement, of boredom, you recognize it and you can immediately release that thought. But if you buy into that story of the thought, that tends to snowball, and then the hindrances again get bigger and start to overpower you. So it's about being mindful of these hindrances, understanding how they arise and how they pass away, how to work with your own mind, and how to be liberated from these hindrances. These are the hindrances. The next part is about the 5 aggregates of clinging. So the 5 aggregates is a model of our experience, our observable experience. It is a model of how our mind interacts with reality, interacts with matter, and creates perceptions, feelings, interpretations, and responses in regard to this reality. So we can think of it like when a baby is born, it already has 5 aggregates, but they are not filled up with experience and with programmed perceptions and reactions. And so when the baby starts to grow up and start to learn, if I cry, I get this. If I make this movement, I get this. If I then start to learn how to speak, and start to create this sense of who it is and how it can interact with this world. And so as adults, we have this developed, and we're all a little bit different because we all have different experiences, but we have these 5 aggregates within us, which are constantly at work in every single moment. And the Buddha invites us to contemplate and to examine and be mindful of these 5 aggregates. It's a way to break down our experience. We've already done a little bit through the different foundations of mindfulness, but here he just outlines it again. So what are the 5 aggregates? The 5 aggregates are firstly the matter, the material form. So we can call this the matter and the body. So this is kind of the physical reality. Physical reality of my body, of its posture, of the different sensations which are happening, the chemical processes inside me, and also outside, the sounds, what I see, objects, what I can hear. So there's the physical reality which is happening. And in response to this physical reality, there are feelings which are created. And feeling is actually something that happens in the mind. So if there is no mind, if there is no consciousness, there's still the physical reality, but there's no experience of feeling. When the mind comes into play and we have a mind, then we start to feel our experience. We start to feel it, and there's pleasant sensations, unpleasant sensations, neutral sensations. So for example, sitting here right now, there's a feeling of the body sitting, which at the moment is quite a neutral, maybe slightly pleasant sensation, where I have different thoughts which are coming, and those have feelings. Some of those thoughts at the moment are more neutral. Then we have the third aggregate. We have the aggregate of cognition. So this is basically like the recognizing part of the mind, the part of mind that is forming perceptions and recognitions. So I know that this form I see over there is a lamp, or this behind me is a bookshelf, or this behind me is a chair, and its color is blue. So there's a part of the mind which has experience from this life, maybe from past lives, who knows, and recognizes different phenomena, different sights, different sounds, different sensations, different thoughts. And then we have volition which arises. So this is what we call sankhara, and I will talk more about sankhara in a moment. It's quite important. It's basically the choices that arise in response to these to this feelings, this material form, and this cognition of what's happening. So I see a chair, the choice arises to go sit on that chair, or the intention, we can call it intention. And when we sit in meditation, we notice that these intentions or choices, they seemingly arise out of our control. They keep arising. We kind of committed to meditate for 1 hour, but how many choices to not meditate come, to choices to think about something, or different thoughts that arise. Even though we try to focus, we try to be mindful, but it doesn't happen. So this is also something that keeps happening in the mind, sankhara. And then there's the last aggregate of mind, which is the consciousness. So this is our faculty to be aware, to know our experience, to be able to perceive our experience, to the consciousness which can recognize the other phenomena as well, the feelings, the cognitions, the sankharas that arise, the matter. And these 5 aggregates, they are continually working together in every moment to create our sense of who we are, to create our sense of how to interact with the world. And it's a very good thing that we have this. But sometimes it also causes some problems. And the one I feel that is most important for now to think about or to mention is this 4th aggregate of the sankhara. So we have, sankharas are like a store of conditioned behavior, conditioned habits, conditioned habitual responses that are within us because of our past experience. And the Buddha says that because also of past lives. I don't know about that. But, and past choices we made in this lifetime. So for example, if I see a chair and I'm used to sitting on a chair and I'm used to recognizing chairs as comfortable, then that intention to go sit on the chair will arise in my mind. So that's a kind of very rudimentary, basic example. But we also have it when we have traumas, for example. So if we have a trauma of being very anxious all the time or very fearful, then I have a conditioned habitual response of fear inside me. And when I start to meet reality, when I start to meet new situations or old situations, what tends to arise inside me is fear, because it is a conditioned habitual response. And maybe certain types of thoughts then get created in response to that situation or fearful of this. And these sankhara, they are primarily mental volitions that arise, so in our mind, and then they manifest in verbal, so what we say then, because of what's in our mind, maybe we respond in a certain way. Sometimes that's not so helpful, that way we respond. Maybe if I'm fearful, I start to try to control reality by expressing, by trying to do things on the verbal level, or on the physical level I become agitated, nervous, fidgety. I need to go eat something or drink something, or the verbal and physical is related to what's arising in the mental. And the craving or the clinging that arises in the mind, what we covered last week in the mind foundation, is also part of this sankhara. If I'm always reacting with a lot of aversion or hatred towards something, then the sankhara that will keep arising in response to my reality is likely that aversion, that hatred. So sankhara always have some sort of craving or clinging with them as well. And it is these sankharas that we are working with during our meditation practice to release, to relax. So it's the truth and it's the reality that we have sankharas and they are there, and it's like a pile. It's a pile that is there and needs to be worked through. So when we sit and meditate where there is no stimulation, all your sankhara will arise. All the habits of your mind will arise. The habit to doubt, the habit to have sensual desire, the habit to check out of experience and be drowsy, the habit to be anxious. It will keep arising in your experience. And what we're doing, we're just aware of it. We notice how it arises, and also we keep coming back, we keep relaxing, and it passes away. All sankharas are impermanent. All sankharas arise and they pass away. And as we stop reacting to these sankharas, which is what we usually do, a sankhara comes and we react more to it, and we just layer on top reactions on top of reactions on top of reactions. Now something arises and we try not to react to it, and it passes away. And something else arises, don't react to it, we just observe it, and it passes away. And then this gets weaker. This part of the mind which is always reacting, it gets weaker. And the other parts of the mind of consciousness, of just recognition, start to get stronger, not overpowered anymore by the sankhara. So in a way it's like reprogramming the mind at the root level to not react to our experience. So you might feel sankharas as certain sensations, feelings in the body, tensions, anxiety, feeling of anxiety. You might feel sankharas as certain types of thought patterns in the mind, thought patterns of trying to fix things, trying to solve things. But usually there is some kind of dukkha in it, there's some kind of dissatisfaction also in the sankhara. There's some kind of feeling of unsatisfaction with the way things are. And this is what we're learning to observe in our meditation.